When I was younger, my father would ask me to go and put my thinking cap on. I didn't actually know what he meant at the time, but it was an imagined cap. It was something like I'd put it over my head and over my ears. But what I knew he was trying to tell me was to listen, to focus, to think, and be creative. So for the next 18 minutes or so, I would like you to put your thinking caps on. So, who's got their thinking caps on? Is anyone? Yeah, a few of you, great. Now that we've got our thinking caps on, another story comes to mind. When I was walking with my father in the street, he would always say hello to people. He would greet them. And one day I said to him, "Dad, do you know those people?" And he looked at me and said, "No, but it's really good to say hello to people. It makes them feel good." That thought has stayed in my mind until today. It influenced my thinking. So I'd like you to turn to the person next to you and say hello to them. Go on. And have a look at what their thinking caps are. Have a look at their thinking caps. And if you don't have one, there's actually one underneath your chair. So please put it on. Thank you. I'm going to start with some of my background. I went from designing jumpers, as you'd say in Australia, or sweaters, as you would say if you're American, or seta in Japanese, to designing organisations. And in between, I worked in industry. I worked in industry for 20 years. I worked as a design consultant, and I used design thinking methods. These are methods for developing ideas and concepts through to implementation. I was fortunate to work with a range of different companies, and I had a lot of different experience and different exposures to different industries and to different business, some of them good and some of them not so. What it did was it informed me about how organisations worked and when they didn't work. Quite often I was working in organisations where they were so siloed, they were departmented, and it was very difficult and very limiting for the participants, for the people in the organisation. It limited their potential. About 10 years ago, I came to a crossroads in my life. I didn't know whether to move forward or back. There were problems or challenges that I really didn't have the answers for. And I needed to have a rethink, a reconsideration about what I wanted to do next and how I was going to move forward in my life. Two questions that came to mind. The first one was, what do I like most about what I do, my work? And the answer for that was the thinking. When I was designing, if I didn't get the thinking right, I wouldn't be able to move on. I'd actually repeat the same mistake, the same pattern. So that was quite significant, working out how do you get your thinking right for the particular challenge. The second question was, why am I at this crossroad now? And what do I need to learn? There must be a lesson here. And out of that came, what is it that I can contribute? What can I contribute from my background? This led me to a journey, an exploration. A famous person once said, organisations don't innovate, people do. I work with organisations to help them to think, to transform. I work with organisations to help them tap into their thinking capabilities and to help them to create. What I really do is I work with people in the organisation. How do you work in your organisations? How do you tap into your thinking? When I work with people in organisations, I bring groups of people from across the business, taking them out of departments and bringing them together to look at problems and challenges that they have, so they work on the projects themselves. This meant my journey started in a way which was full of exploration. It was full of curiosity. And I would encourage you today to be open to look at your curiosity, how you consider risk, and could you turn it to trust, and how you think and how you act. And my journey led me to develop design of thinking, which is an integrative framework. It's about empowering, it's about envisioning, and it's about engaging people in organisations. To do this, I help you to tap into and align your thinking capabilities. I start with the people. I start with human dynamics. Well, that's what I would say to corporates. But when I'm speaking with you, I'm talking about being a human being at work. So what does that mean? How do you speak to your colleagues? How do you work together? How do you work individually? What do you bring to work that actually engages other people in dialogue, in conversation? How do you take risks and turn those into trusts in your business? And of course, to do that, we need to consider how we could shift our mindset to do this. Quite often we don't know how until we have another look. And shifting mindset is a way to do that. And of course, then we can implement new projects or new ideas, new concepts. So where I'm going to start on this journey, which was my journey, and it's dovetailed with the framework that I've put together over the last 10 years or so. So getting started, it was a discovery, and I'm going to use the metaphor of sailing. Of course, when you start to sail, you need to work out where you're going to go. When you're preparing to sail, you need to know who's going to be on board. Where are you going to go? Are you going to a port, to a bay, or are you going to be in a race? What sort of things do you need to have on board? Who's going to check the sails? Who's going to work out what food you need for the journey? And it's the same in business. What are the challenges? What are the challenges that you confront? And how are you going to prepare yourself to start the exploration of finding out about the challenges? What is the discovery? And of course, once we do make those decisions and start to plan, then we need to have the right people in the room. Of course, once we set sail and we're out at sea, we have the elements to consider, facing the elements. Well, there's wind, there's tides, there's currents, there's the unknown. And of course, we head in one direction thinking we're going to our destination, but the elements change and we have to tack, which is a sailing term for turning, and we need to tack in another direction unexpectedly, sometimes slowly and sometimes in a hurry, depending on the conditions around us. And it's the same in business. Learning to tack in business. We may have a plan. We've prepared our journey. We've had our project and we've decided to go in a certain way. We've done a lot of groundwork. But when we do start the project, sometimes things change. We look out to see who our end users are. Other things come along that are unexpected, just like at sea. And we need to reconsider those things in the process of what we're doing in our work, in the challenge. When you plan your journey, are you prepared to let go of that because something else comes along? Are you prepared to shift? Well, my journey was up and down, just like being at sea. It was varied. I thought I was just going to go in a straight line and I'll work out what I'm going to do next. Well, it actually wasn't like that at all. And I don't expect that your journeys will be the same, especially as we move further and further into the 21st century. I started off my journey with my current mindset. What did I really think? What did I like to do? What do you like to do? What are you passionate about? What are you motivated by? What do you bring to work that motivates you and stimulates you and your colleagues? I started with drawing and painting. They were my passions. They are my passions. I thought I could go in a straight course, but like the sea, I didn't. However, it took me on a journey that was quite extraordinary. I was able to go and learn from other people and attend workshops in the USA. I also had the privilege to learn from a wonderful person who taught me about neuroscience and neurobiology. And as I went, I kept applying all of this into the mix. It enabled me to further my thinking and start to put this framework together. So have a think about what you're passionate about, what you're really interested in, and see how you can bring that to life. And of course, the questions come up. What do you know? So what do you know? And what do you know you know? And what don't you know? And what don't you know you know? They're quite complicated, and they're blind spots. We can't see some of those things. But they're vital to ask ourselves if we're going to move beyond the current paradigm. And of course, my journey, as I expressed, was full of possibilities. I tried not to limit. Of course, I had lots of limits on the way, but it was full of possibilities. And possibilities are what we know. They're things that we are comfortable with. And they're also things that we are not comfortable with. They're things that are hidden. We can't quite see them, but they're there. That is what a possibility. If we just stay with what we know, it's a probability. It's something that we know, and we might follow that. And a lot of organisations do follow that, and it's safe, and it may be appropriate. However, is it appropriate for the future? And is it appropriate if we're going to shift our mindset? But along the way, yes, we do come upon obstacles or reefs, and of course we can't sail into those and get over them. Sometimes we might have to wait for the tide to rise, or we might have to just tack and go back. In an organisation, some of our systems and structures have been set up since the Industrial Revolution or the information and knowledge age. The question is, are they useful? Are they going to benefit your business in the future? Will they help you to grow? Will they help you to contribute? So in order to address that, we look at what are the next steps? How do we shift our mindset to have a look at those problems? Sometimes they're actually healthy problems and healthy challenges, and sometimes they're impeding us from moving forward. So what I do is I help you look at your problem, maybe from this side where you're face on with it, and I help you to walk around it, to see it from other perspectives. And when you do, then you have choices. Of course you can stay the same. However, you can move on, and quite often when we move on, we find insight, we find wisdom, we find vision, we find purpose, and it helps us to grow, and it helps our organisations to grow. I'm just going to tell you a story. It's about 3 directors that I worked with. They had been working together for 5 years. Their focus was around manufacturing, and they were having difficulties communicating. They couldn't agree on things. The production was an issue. Their understanding of what they wanted to create. There was a lot of different issues. What we did was I engaged them. I should just tell you, the roles of the 3 people were quite diverse as directors. One was the innovator creator. One was the project manager, and the third director was the financial guy. And of course, they had different roles, but they're all part of guiding and directing and being on board the same boat, basically. I engaged them in a creative activity, and I should mention, my work does involve creative activities. And then I engaged them in a series of questions. This enabled them to actually consider what they were doing and how they were doing it. Each had their own voice. And as they wrote them up on a whiteboard, They were able to start to consider what the other one was saying. The creative activity enabled them to see some possibilities for themselves. However, when they moved across into looking at their own blocks or obstacles, they started to see what they hadn't seen before. And this enabled them to gain perspective and shift their perspective. So that they became aware, they became conscious of what they were doing, and they could expand. And the result of that was that they were able to find insight. And what actually happened, the three of them actually more or less stood back, and together they said, we're saying the same thing. We can't even see each other. We can't see what we're doing, but we now know we're saying the same thing. We now know how to connect. We now know how to move forward. And this is how this journey panned out. They were able to now continue on and reinvent a project for themselves as a team and implement that and bring that to life in their organisation. And of course, once you go along this journey, eventually, when you're sailing, you learn to take the helm. You learn to be able to be out at sea, having prepared for the sail, having faced the elements. You're equipped to be out at sea. Sometimes the seas are high and they're rough, and sometimes they're smooth. But as you move forward, you take your project into outcome. You become the design thinkers in your business. So being a human being in the 21st century, what does that mean for everybody when you go to work? The problems in the 21st century are now quite different. We have climate change, we have privacy issues, and in Japan we have an ageing population and a diminishing population. And there's more. How are you going to think, to rethink? How are you going to apply your thinking and your creativity and your imagination to tap into your thinking capabilities? So I ask you to hold a mirror up to your life and to your organisations and think, create. And before you go today, please take off your thinking caps, put them in your pocket, and when you find you're at a challenge, or you're challenged, I should say, when you're challenged and you're out at sea, way out at sea, remember to put your thinking cap on. You never know what you might discover. You may learn to turn risk into trust. Do, act, and make. Take action for the betterment of the 21st century.